Our cognitive patterns fundamentally shape every aspect of our lived experience. When we venture beyond traditional thinking frameworks through profound philosophical inquiries, we uncover truths that can transform our understanding of existence itself. This exploration leads us to one of humanity's most enduring puzzles, the relationship between consciousness and mortality. The ancient philosopher Epicurus offered a seemingly paradoxical insight: death, the most frightening of all evils, means nothing to us. When we exist, death is not yet present, and when death comes, we are not. This profound observation reveals that death remains absent for the living, since it has not arrived, and meaningless for the deceased, since they no longer possess awareness to contemplate it. Some individuals find themselves preoccupied with mortality, while others rarely consider it. Some push thoughts of death entirely from their minds, yet regardless of how frequently or infrequently we contemplate our finite nature, death remains the universal human destiny. The very fact that we can engage in contemplation confirms our current state of being alive, and our current aliveness guarantees our eventual mortality. Adapting René Descartes' famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am," we might say, "I think, therefore I shall die." Within this connection between thought and death lies something far more disturbing than the simple acknowledgement that thinking beings must eventually perish. Thinking not only confirms our mortality, but reveals a profound and somewhat terrifying paradox about the nature of consciousness itself. In all probability, no continuation of experience awaits us beyond this existence. The word nothing here serves as an inadequate placeholder for something that transcends language, thought, concepts, and subjective conscious awareness. While we cannot entirely dismiss the possibility of some form of continuation, perhaps an experience of something, somewhere, somehow, maintaining continuity in our subjective awareness, the weight of evidence suggests otherwise. If we place any confidence in physical reality, and our scientific comprehension of that reality, then consciousness emerges from the physical mechanisms of the brain. When the brain or an adequate substitute ceases to function or exist, the subjective individual simply vanishes. No experience remains whatsoever. This raises a profound question. When we contemplate death, what exactly are we thinking about? How can we conceive of the complete absence of not only all ideas, but the very capacity to form ideas? To contemplate one's own death requires projecting oneself forward in time and form, into the very shape of nothingness itself. This exercise is fundamentally nonsensical. Therefore, death is not merely unknown to us, it is fundamentally unknowable. Eugene Thacker argues in the Dust of This Planet that human subjective thought inevitably encounters limits and contradictions when attempting to access and comprehend the true nature of reality, the world, as it exists independent of human perception. Thacker's argument suggests that when thought reaches its boundaries, and we glimpse the shadow or outline of phenomena that exceed our comprehension, because their very nature contradicts our own, we experience a form of existential torment and horror. He writes, "The human can only understand the human by transforming it into an object of relation, while the human can only relate to the objective world by transforming that world into something familiar, accessible, or intuitive in human terms." This leaves us with one remaining avenue, attempting to adopt the perspective of the non-human itself. As thinking, embodied beings unable to fully detach ourselves from the subject-object relations that define us, this approach is undoubtedly paradoxical. In fact, it is destined to fail from the outset. Death represents perhaps the most explicit and tangible manifestation of this paradox and limit of thought. It encompasses not merely the loss of everything we possess and everyone we cherish, but also everything we know and feel, along with our very capacity to know and feel. When we attempt to apply our subjectivity and thought processes to death, its essential truth dissolves away. We can know of death, but we can never know death itself. It is a threshold we approach, but can never truly peer beyond. This realization, though perhaps obvious minus sounding, becomes deeply puzzling and unsettling when we genuinely attempt to make sense of death's existential riddle. No wonder religious and spiritual traditions have persistently painted the doorway of mortality with consoling, beautiful imagery. Humanity has long sought to convince itself that what can be depicted on the exterior of the door can represent what lies within. But it cannot. Even if some material within the brain or universe transcends our current understanding, something we might characterize as soul-minus, like, it remains material that follows the materialistic principles of the universe. When the body dies, it seemingly no longer exists in the form required for subjective function. What generates mind and subjective selfhood appears to require sustained, continuous function that is broken and destroyed upon death. Regardless of what might be likely or possible after death, nothing resolves the fact that we simply do not know, and seemingly cannot know, what transpires when our brain ceases functioning. No belief system, whether dualist, materialist, spiritualist, religious, or otherwise, possesses any foundation in ultimate truth. They represent theories at best, and wishful thinking at worst. We lack sufficient understanding of mind, consciousness, and reality's nature to make definitive claims about what might or might not follow. The concept of death, therefore, appears to be the kind of paradox we cannot resolve. This is precisely why it remains deeply unsettling and confounding for so many of us. But perhaps, like many paradoxes, we learn more, not by resolving it, but by embracing it. By releasing some degree of resistance to death, and its paradoxical reality, and the unknowable nature of existence more broadly, we begin to recognize its mystery, not merely as an object of fear, but also as a source of awe. Death becomes a wellspring of humility, perspective, and meaning. As author J.J. van der Leeuw observed, the mystery of life is not a problem to be solved, it is a reality to be experienced. Perhaps we might paraphrase, the paradox of death is not a problem to be solved, it is a reality not to be experienced. Our attention, awareness, and being can and should be directed here and now. If we reverse the paradox of death, moving away from thought toward death, and instead from death toward thought, we arrive at something profound. If we can contemplate death, then we are alive, right now. And if we are alive right now, conscious and self-aware, then we possess a capacity that seemingly no other formations of universal matter can achieve. In all likelihood, this capacity exists only temporarily and will never return. We each currently possess the ability to think, imagine, and comprehend. We can conceive of our own existence and mortality and poetically express wonders and meaning from it all. Death imbues life with significance, not merely because it adds urgency and scarcity to existence, but because it reminds us that beyond each of our lives stretches an infinitude of unknowable possibilities. There exists a possible infinite nothingness beyond us that right now, for whatever reason, we can perceive, contemplate, and fear from the cliff edge of the something that constitutes our brief existence. Our relationship with our thoughts fundamentally shapes our relationship with life itself. We largely experience what we think about, and we can only understand and contemplate what we know how to process. Being able to both navigate and expand the limits of our thinking represents perhaps one of the most important and powerful capacities we possess. The mystery of consciousness in the face of mortality remains one of philosophy's most compelling paradoxes. Rather than seeking to solve this unsolvable riddle, we might instead learn to live within its mystery, finding not answers, but a deeper appreciation for the extraordinary fact that we exist at all. Capable of wondering about our own wondering, conscious of our own consciousness, alive to contemplate the very nature of being alive.